everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to read out this document here, which I found recently. This is what my mother wrote about me growing up, and I thought it made very interesting reading. She wrote about this at the time when I was trying to get a GP referral to have my suspected autism assessed and diagnosed. So I thought I'd read this out to you just to give you a kind of overview of my development from my mother's perspective. I'm going to be doing two videos on this so that the video doesn't fade out, so I'll split it into two sections. Anna's childhood development as remembered by Frances Lansley, Anna's mother. Pregnancy. I was 32 and my husband was 40 when Anna was born on the 27th of July 1987. When I was 4 months pregnant, I learnt that my mother had breast cancer. This was a tremendous shock as she was only 60 and had never been ill before, and there was absolutely no history of any form of cancer in the family. All my grandparents lived to a good age. I knew, although it was never spoken, that she was dying, as it was obvious she had a very virulent strain and needed massive doses of chemotherapy before she could have a mastectomy. My parents lived in Los Angeles, and before I knew I was pregnant, I had proposed a visit in Easter 1987. Anna was due July 1987, and now I felt I could not pull out. My husband and I therefore went over in early April. My husband returned after 2 weeks, and I stayed on for about 10 days longer until the beginning of May. My mother was receiving chemotherapy while I was there and was audibly sick during the nights, and I found it impossible to sleep. Night after night I could not sleep. I do not normally have insomnia. My father was absolutely distraught and took me long hikes in the mountains. He lost his appetite, and I likewise lost mine. When I returned to Shrewsbury, where we were then living, I was also upset as I was losing my job and dreaded being unemployed. All seemed well with the pregnancy, however, until I went for a routine check, and concern was expressed that the baby had not grown. I was referred to the hospital, and the registrar recommended a caesarean at 32 weeks. We requested a second opinion from the consultant, and he said that we could leave things as long as I had bed rest and came in for very regular fetal monitoring. We lived near the hospital. The baby was very lively in terms of kicking, and in the end, Anna was delivered at full term with a normal delivery and seemed fine apart from the fact that she was very thin and small, 5 pounds 4 ounces. Babyhood. I bonded with Anna immediately and she seemed a perfect baby, although very noisy. She smiled within a few weeks and laughed and giggled a lot and banged her legs. She crawled at 9 months and walked at 13 months and was very energetic. As soon as she could crawl, she never stayed still and I was constantly chasing her. When Anna was 6 months old, we moved to Chichester, which was incredibly stressful, exacerbated by the fact that house prices in Chichester had just gone through the roof. I was very isolated and we ended up with an enormous mortgage for an unmodernised house, to which I was ashamed to invite people. In Shrewsbury we had been comfortably off in a big house and no money worries. Toddlerhood. Anna was a very energetic toddler and often laughed. On the other hand, she had tantrums that would go on for ages. For example, if put into a pushchair, she would scream and scream and not give up. I noticed a difference with her brother, 2 years younger, who would also cry, but seemed to recognise at a certain point that further protest was futile. Concern was expressed about Anna's small size, but because she ate well and was so obviously energetic, this was not considered important. At her 18 months check, the health visitor said she was borderline because she did not place building blocks as would be expected. I had little experience of children and no relatives who might have noticed anything unusual about Anna's development. My mother died in Los Angeles shortly before Anna was a year old. My husband's parents on the Isle of Wight took no active involvement, and Anna did not have any cousins until she was over 2 years old. Childhood. When Anna was 3, she started at 2 playgroups, and when she was 4, she attended Chichester Nursery at Woodlands. She started at Jessie Young Husband's School when she was nearly 5. The following things became more and more noticeable as she got older. She continued to have tantrums and lengthy giggling fits. I had given Anna lots of physical contact when she was a baby, but gradually I found it harder and harder to respond to her physically. I'm not sure how much this came from me and how much from her, but I felt a coldness from her, and that she recoiled from cuddles rather than seeking them. She did not seem to welcome being kissed goodnight. She did not find it easy to settle to things requiring dexterity or application or requiring instructions to be followed. She could not do even the most basic jigsaws. She could not do puzzles aimed at 3-year-olds even when she was much older. I found it very difficult to teach her basic tasks such as tying shoelaces. This took ages, and I despaired that she would ever learn. Clumsiness and poor coordination became more apparent, and she walked in an ungainly way. At home she always walked on to tiptoe, which I thought looked very odd. She learnt to ride a bicycle and enjoyed cycling. She also seemed to enjoy ball games. I gave up trying to teach her to swim, however, as it just led to battles. She did, however, learn to read quite early with my help, and people were initially impressed by her reading ability. She loved reading aloud, and when she was 4 this seemed acceptable and she got praise for it. She did not stop reading aloud, and as she got older this got more irritating. She would read aloud at home in a very fast, monotonous way. In fact, she continued reading aloud until she was a teenager, and it was a constant source of arguments at home, with me asking her to read to herself and her ignoring my requests. Her reading aloud also disturbed other children at school, so teachers told me. At nursery school, the teacher told me she was worried about Anna because she would not sit still during her reading lessons and was distracting the other children. I was now making some friends in the area, and Anna had some other children she played with, but it was becoming apparent that she only seemed to relate to children younger than herself, with whom she would run around giggling. She was not relating to other girls in her year at nursery school or primary school. She enjoyed painting, but I was becoming increasingly conscious that she was unable to easily tackle other games and activities designed for her age group. When she started primary school and I went to the first parents' meeting, I remember being very worried by the teacher's comments. I had hoped Anna would be all right, at least as far as English and reading was concerned, but the teacher said that Anna's comprehension was much poorer than would be expected at her age. She also had no understanding of numbers. I was asked to get books from the Early Learning Centre and do exercises with her, which I did, but it just resulted in frustration all round. Anna simply could not do the exercises, even ones aimed at much younger children, and responded by giggling and refusing to sit down. And then I would get angry and shout at her, which obviously I wish I had not done, but at the time I think I thought she was being awkward, rather than that she really could not do them. As Anna progressed through primary school, teachers would say things like she was an enigma, or I cannot understand Anna. She puzzled them because she could read but was very poor at comprehension, and the worst in the class as far as mathematics was concerned. She was often alone in a playground. She did not really join in at PE, and she could not play the recorder, although I spent ages trying to help her. She did eventually get some special needs support, but it was only in her last 2 years that the school began using the word we at parents' evenings. We will see what we can do to help Anna. I did voluntary work listening to children read at the school, but when I came to do this, teachers would often complain about Anna to me, say she was, for example, disrupting other children, but I did not know what I could do to stop this. Anna seemed increasingly immature compared to other children her age. She got on quite well with her brother Martin when he was little, but he was 2 years younger than her. We started giving her piano lessons, but she refused to concentrate, and in the end the teacher actually requested us not to send Anna anymore. Okay, so that's half of it. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to do the next video now, so it doesn't cut out on me, on part 2 of my mother's list of her concerns. So I'll move on now to part 2.